Well, good evening and welcome to Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ daily evening television news. We're broadcasting live and then we're available on demand. And we're available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple Television, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson, and this evening we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ plus community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ plus evening news show. Whatever happens unique in LGBTQ plus news, you will see it and hear it.
Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, is a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same model of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ plus community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ plus community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community, Latino, lesbian, trans, students, youth, seniors, HIV/AIDS, healthcare, business, political advocacy, and faith. Help us support our community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ plus media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ plus experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ plus and broader community.
Well, let's begin by welcoming anchor Mateo Ventura Bruer. Mateo is the executive director of the Aqua Foundation and the Aqua Foundation for Women, the state of Florida's only nonprofit organization dedicated to serving and supporting LGBTQ plus women. Mateo has a master's degree in social justice and human rights from Arizona State University, where he focused on the intersection of the transgender experience and Latinidad, and is proud to be Aqua's first transgender executive director. Welcome, Mateo.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Let's welcome anchor Glen Weinzimer. Glen is the founder of the Smart Ride, an annual 2-day, 165-mile bicycle ride from Miami to Key West. The Smart Ride is celebrating its 20th consecutive year providing funding for AIDS service organizations throughout Florida. Last year alone, over 10,000 individuals and organizations made donations to fight HIV/AIDS. In the past 19 years, more than $14.9 million has been raised and returned to help individuals at risk for or infected by HIV live healthier, more fulfilled lives. Glen also owns Bona Italian restaurant in the heart of Wilton Manors. Bona Italian holds weekly Give Back Mondays. In the past 6 years, Bona has raised and returned over $60,000 to help local organizations meet their mission. Welcome, Glen.
Thank you so much, Mateo. It is good to be back with everyone at the table. Let's welcome anchor Dr. Bobby Huen. Bobby is a certified civil and family mediator. As the founder and principal mediator at BH Conflict Resolution Services, he helps families, businesses, and individuals resolve disputes of all types. Having grown up everywhere from Hong Kong to Boston, Bobby is proud to offer a global perspective to current events. When he is not at the office or here in the It's Happening Out studio, Bobby enjoys gaming, Lego building, and hanging out on the drive. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, Glenn. Let's welcome anchor Gregg Shapiro, an inductee into the Chicago LGBT Hall of Fame. Gregg is the author of 9 books, including the forthcoming Refrain in Light, an entertainment journalist whose celebrity interviews and music reviews run in a variety of regional LGBTQ plus and mainstream publications and websites. His movie review column called Screensaver can be found in SFGN, San Francisco Bay Area Reporter, RottenTomatoes.com, and more. Good evening, Greg.
He sounds like fun, doesn't he? We are the reporters for Queer News tonight, and this evening we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ plus community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the Queer News for today, Tuesday, May 23rd, and I'd like to wish a happy National Lucky Penny Day to y'all.
Lucky penny. Okay, I haven't seen a penny in eons. All right. First, let's queer up breaking news. Hamburger Mary's files federal drag queen lawsuit against Florida and Governor Ron DeSantis. A popular Orlando restaurant that regularly features drag shows filed a federal lawsuit against the state of Florida and Governor Ron DeSantis yesterday, less than a week after he signed a bill that targets drag performances. The lawsuit, filed in Orlando federal court by the owner of Hamburger Mary's Orlando, claims the state is depriving the business of its First Amendment rights to free expression. The restaurant is asking the court to temporarily stop the law from taking effect while the case moves forward. Hamburger Mary's Bar and Grill has more than a dozen locations around the U.S., with the Orlando restaurant opening in 2008. According to the lawsuit, the restaurant had hosted family-friendly drag shows on Sundays, but the new Florida law is forcing them to ban children from all shows. This has led to a 20% drop in Sunday bookings. Proponents of the legislation have said the law is meant to keep children from viewing sexually explicit performances. Lawyers for the business argue the new law is so broad and vague that it could be applied to almost any performance that involves a man dressing up like a woman, even if the performance isn't sexual in nature. Now, we knew the show was going to drop. This is it. The breaking news of this is that this very likely, if the federal court will hear the case and then stay the law, which has better than 50-50 chance that they will stay the law, because it's an implementation of a new law, of a new interpretation of what drag is. We explained here at Queer News tonight what great lengths that they went to try to pre-justify the constitutional arguments that they knew were going to come. Here they are. First Amendment free expression rights. At the minimum, I think we are very likely going to see the federal court, not in state courts, but in federal court, stay the new law while this moves forward in conversation. If that happens, the month of June for Florida improves significantly. We will watch this very, very closely.
I think a temporary injunction is more than likely, as you have said. And I think the problem here is that Florida has to define what is quote-unquote sexually explicit. A man in a dress inherently cannot be quote-unquote sexually explicit, because I can be in a nun's habit, so how can I be sexually explicit in any way? And a nun's habit is, of course, women's clothing. Now, the problem is that they need to skirt around that by naming it vaguely as sexually suggestive, so that, Moms for Liberty can file a complaint. This is not about us. This is about letting bigots basically squeeze through the back door to persecute the community.
Well, broad and vague are Casey and Ron's pet names for each other.
That's funny. That's funny. One final thought then is the argument in terms of the First Amendment free speech right is the natural argument against this law. The reason it's the natural argument against this law is they went so far to try to prevent free speech expression arguments against the passage of the law, which is why they made it very vague. Very likely, this is encouraging. This is really, really big news, because like what is going on in Tennessee in the process of going through, what happens if they have a temporary injunction and then the federal court rules against the state, it's going to be appealed. It's going to go to the Supreme Court, and then anything is up for considerations. However, I think even the Supreme Court is going to be very hard pressed to define that someone in drag is sexually explicit, which is what Bobby's observation is, and it's going to be even more difficult to indicate that the free expression First Amendment rights are not at play here. The argument that has been made for the last 6 months in the issue of what we watched in the approaching issue over drag queens was the compare and contrast to Hooters girls. I love Hooters. We all love Hooters wings. We have nothing but respect and love for Hooters. However, you cannot bring an 8-year-old boy into Hooters and not say, this is sexually explicit.
Absolutely.
The state's burden of proof will be to convince a federal judge and then the Supreme Court that there's a difference. They will not be able to do that, and therefore they are providing a separate but equal exclusion, which is the case point of the strike down of this law.
And I give a lot of credit to Hamburger Marys and any other organization that's willing to take the bullet for everybody.
Yeah.
Because
that's what happens here.
Yeah. They're standing up and they're making the first statement, and others will follow.
This story is a big, big story, especially for June Pride Month. Everyone will watch closely and report on it here at Queer News Tonight. We continue. Next, let's queer up breaking news. Georgetown Law School issues an emergency bulletin over protecting Pride events from armed extremist activity. The Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection of Georgetown has issued an emergency bulletin over protecting Pride events from attacks. Published originally on May 19th and reiterated in terms of gun use yesterday, the guidance is designed to help local organizers in the LGBTQ+ community address potential threats by unlawful private paramilitary groups during Pride Month, which aims to inform local organizations about the legal options they have to counter these threats and ensure the safety of the event attendees. The guidance says that, given that these incidents have taken place in the past, it is possible that extremists armed with firearms or other weapons and sometimes acting as a private militia will attempt to target and interfere with upcoming Pride Month events, endangering LGBTQ+ individuals and their allies. However, the LGBTQ+ community members and their allies inside and outside the government should understand what they can do to keep Pride Month safe by knowing that state laws prohibit private paramilitary activity, even where it does not involve physical violence against a targeted person or persons. All 50 states prohibit private, unauthorized militias from engaging in activities reserved for the official state militia, including law enforcement activities. Nearly every state constitution prohibits groups functioning outside the authority of the state government, such as a paramilitary groups namely like Proud Boys and Patriot Front. Georgetown law is saying that they are acting like a military group in their organization and are therefore illegal by state laws, including the laws adopted by Florida. This is another big moment. First, we're watching very smart legal opinion begin to form against Governor DeSantis and other situations like this around the country. Last week, the issue of being able to open carry in the state of Florida is now the law of Florida. If I want to bring a gun to a Pride event, I can.
Even if it's private? If you're paying to get in?
I don't know. Split,
okay.
But I believe you can. Because private doesn't own the road, the public road. And for example, in our event, that is a state road. The real big issue here is that a group demonstration by Proud Boys is different than if they carry guns. And so if a group organizes in carrying guns, the argument by Georgetown law in terms of militias is that they're acting like a militia in official capacity for the state, which is illegal. And so as a result, this is a very well thought out defense of local and state law enforcement to say that is illegal. Now, the question will be on the balance of open carry, but this is a very significant moment. And the other big news here is they elevate the memo, this 4-page memo that was fundamentally published yesterday, that there is high degree of risk with June Pride Month. The other standard, I think, to suggest that that is true is Governor DeSantis, who is behind and is the architect of what we have watched in Florida, is getting ready to announce his presidential campaign, as we reported last week at Queer News Tonight, in conjunction with June Pride Month. So we can't argue June Pride Month is of no consequence. Of course it's of consequence. I'm going to announce my presidential campaign on the back of June Pride Month. As de facto, the importance of this kicks in.
I think one of the sad things is that we've been going through this for years. I mean, if you look at any of the prides that are happening in our state, there's always military, there's state police, there's local county police, there's our local, we've got towers that go up. So in some ways, nothing has changed. Other than there's more visibility because of DeSantis. But I mean, as it is, people are afraid of going to these things, and this just makes it even worse as we go into Pride Month. Should we be celebrating Pride, or should we be more like Stonewall? There's a lot going on, and is this a time to celebrate as a community and make believe everything else isn't happening? That's what I have to question. Like, there's no political statement being made.
Answer your question. What do you think from your standpoint?
From my standpoint, I think at every stage there should be a political statement by someone influential. I don't care if it's the musician that's singing, but someone that's going to draw enough people to the stage that there's your opportunity. Because we can't just pretend it's not existing. And in many ways, that's what we're doing. There are so many people in our community that will not even know there are no drag queens on those stages. They won't even realize it because they'll see drag queens walking around, but they won't see them on the stages, and because they're not following what's happening, they're not going to know it's missing. And they won't know anything's missing until everything's gone. And I take issue with some of the prides that are canceling. I know we'll probably talk about that later, but I understand the fear, but I also understand that they win if we go and hide. And like I said, nothing's changed in the last couple of years. That one incident we had in Wilton Manors was blown completely out of proportion when the gentleman was run over by someone else from the chorus.
Well, because we were living, at that time, we were really living in fear of any kind of violence.
But now nothing's changed.
No.
Actually, in fact, the fear has been heightened. But
yes.
I think I want to bring out another point, is that the Georgetown memo highlights something which is the liability of the state. For example, let's say that, we have WMPD, obviously, Wilton PD, we'll have Broward Sheriff. But what if, DeSantis tell, state troopers to basically stand down and let the Proud Boys do their thing? We're just not going to intervene. Now, Georgetown has spelled it out loud that if you do not enforce your own laws, you will be liable.
Right.
You will be liable. So the local enforcement, state enforcement cannot just ignore it and pretend that the Patriot Front doesn't exist and beating up protesters or beating up LGBTQ people.
I think that's a really excellent point, especially given that in a few years ago when it was Black Lives Matter protests, that's a lot of what was happening. The cops were doing the violence and perpetrating a lot of the violence, and in things we've seen in certain instances around the country, they're not doing anything, and they're being complicit and allowing it.
I'm curious, did anybody, when you heard the news of Georgetown Law's memo about protection risk against home front terrorist groups? At the end of the day, both of these organizations are terrorist groups. Moms for Liberty is a terrorist group, except they're going into school boards, but they're terrorist groups. Did anybody think that there wasn't credibility on the fact that what we're living in Florida, that this is not a credible threat? Did anybody think we're okay, or did you believe and accept that this is a credible threat that we should be paying attention to?
I think something is coming. whether the size and scale is different. I mean, it can be just maybe a dozen Proud Boys show up, walk in front of the gables, yelling their stuff while everyone's standing in line waiting to get in, rolling their eyes. Or, maybe it's a truckload of Patriots front people with their god-awful blue polo shirt and khakis and with the white mask, storming out of the back of a truck. Right. Hopefully law enforcement intercept them before they ever get near the parade.
And not just here, but at any pride, it applies to us for sure, but to any pride in the month of June, any pride festivities, it's important.
And then you harken back to, how did this all happen too? Normalizing Trump's rhetoric that say it's okay to hate you because you're gay or you're black or you're anything, you're trans. It's okay. And him continually to repeat that has given people permission to hate. And, he's the one who said, I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. If that isn't, carte blanche to do what you want.
It's not just him, though. I mean, Ron DeSantis
emboldened everybody.
But that was the first one that opened that door that everyone else walked through.
Yeah, because when I remember growing up, there's still people who are racist, still people who are homophobic, but it wasn't polite to share those thoughts. It was something you were supposed to not feel. And by putting it on the loudest stage and in the loudest person, now everyone's like, oh, it's okay. I don't have to be ashamed. I'm supposed to be this way.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, obviously we're going to follow this breaking news closely. Next, let's queer up the road to Stonewall. Tampa, Port St. Lucie, and now St. Cloud prides all have canceled over fear of the Florida drag ban.
Tampa Pride on the River is canceled. Tampa Pride President Kerry West said the festival's drag queen performers may violate the newly expanded Parental Rights and Education Act, which critics call the Don't Say Gay law.
But a lot of drag queens, a lot of famous RuPaul drag queens that come in for the event, and people come flying in for that event just to see the famous drag queens.
But supporters of the act say children are at risk.
The other side believes that 8-year-olds should pick their pronouns, that 9-year-olds should read books about sex, that 10-year-olds should be able to take puberty blockers.
The new law prohibits children from sexually explicit adult performances, including drag shows.
We're protecting kids, and we're going to protect kids when it's popular. We'll protect kids even when you take some incoming as a result of maybe offending some ideologies or some agendas out there, but that's fine.
Ideologies and agendas, dog whistle. A Pride event scheduled for June 10 was canceled on Thursday in the wake of the recent Florida legislation. Organizers announced on social media that the event, dubbed Pride in St. Cloud, would be canceled after months of planning. The organizers stated that recent state laws created a climate of fear for LGBTQ plus people in Florida. The St. Cloud event isn't the only Pride-related festival that has been canceled in recent months. Several others have also been scrapped in places like Tampa and Port St. Lucie. Lake County's first ever Pride is in trouble after losing donors and sponsorships. These cancellations came after Florida lawmakers passed SB 1438, also known as the Protection of Children Act. Pride in St. Cloud organizers didn't explicitly state which laws they blamed or how these laws put the LGBTQ community at risk. However, they did say on their Facebook page that drag queens, including the event's headlining government, no longer felt safe performing. They also pointed to an incident in Lake Nona where an electronic traffic sign was tampered with to say, "Kill all gays." Organizers said they did not have the money to hire private security for any safety concerns. Organizers also said that refunds for the event would be processed as soon as possible. It's a disturbing trend, clearly. Other news that we report on in Hamburger Mary's. St. Cloud, by the way, is in the southern part of Central Florida, about 30 minutes south of Orlando. The Hamburger Mary's federal lawsuit is encouraging, although will not affect St. Cloud's cancellation. I was at a breakfast meeting this morning called Breakfast for the Mayors that was put on by the WMBA, the Wilton Manors Business Association, and the mayor of Broward County, Dean Trentellis, the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, the mayor of Wilton Manors, and the mayor of Oakland Park. And I specifically asked them in terms of how the communities were working together to celebrate June Pride Month and exactly what they would be doing, interacting. They were all universally clear that there is, in support of our Pride next month at Stonewall on Wilton Drive, that it is going forward and that the issues of the legality of performance is one issue, but it does not mean a ban on drag. It does not mean that you can't be in drag, and that's not what's going to be enforced. And so they're going to follow the letter of the law, and Stonewall is not going to be affected in cancellation. But the trend that we're watching here is disturbing. Why other news, like our breaking news today, is important.
Well, I think the thing is, Wilton is such a big event. Stonewall is a huge event, probably the biggest pride in Florida. It's hard to shut us down, but the law is designed to inflict cruelty on the smaller locales, the smaller towns that are starting out with pride. I mean, in South Florida, we have like 12 different prides, like every year. But, St. Cloud, not going to have any pride. Port St. Lucie, not going to have any pride. Even Tampa, a giant city, which is, supposed to be, but Dan Hillsborough County.
I have to say one of the sound bites out of our story today that I think is important is not the actual ban issue that relates to drag and not the decision of cancellation. Those are secondary issues. The big issue, I think, in this story is the secondary effects. Whether insurance providers will insure events, restaurants, places that do drag, and the potential risk of insurance. The issue that's going on in Lake County, which is an hour northwest of Orlando, they're expressing exactly what was designed in this Florida legislative session to create confusion and vagueness, which creates fear. And as a result, the fear is an issue of sponsors drying up. We're going to take a year off and we'll wait and see what happens. Well, that's as effective as a ban of drag, because what they're doing is they're drying up your money sources to be able to celebrate a Pride Festival event. Because it was very clear last year in terms of what happened in Stonewall. The policing piece of Stonewall was like $90,000.
Right.
Well, what nonprofit or organizational structure are you going to say you got to pay $90,000 for security, for police protection, if you don't have sponsors to help offset those costs? So they're accomplishing what they wanted to set out to.
Yeah,
and they go under the banner protection of children. I mean, that's the part that makes your skin crawls, because this is, what are you protecting children from? Their belief that something is inherently bad that isn't. I do commend Commissioner Caputo, because he plans, and he's been posting it all over social media, he's a Wilton Manors commissioner, that he's going to be in full drag, and he's like, let them arrest me because I'm happy to take this to court. I have the means and I'm willing to do it. Another person's saying, I'll do this for all of us.
And something that we haven't really touched on is that it's not just drag under this bill. It's so vague that it is purposefully trying to encompass trans people, because that's somebody who they believe is dressing in a manner that doesn't align with. So they're effectively trying to ban trans people from public life. And I think something that Glenn said in an earlier story about how we got here is partially us as a community trying to sanitize ourselves, trying to, no kink at Pride, and trying to make things. I think having a family area, cool, awesome, I love that. I have a child, I take her to that section. But you can't, if we try to cut off pieces of our community and say some things are not meant to be seen in public, soon enough, it's nothing about us is meant to be seen in public.
It's shoving us back into the closet. The whole point is one part at a time. The T goes first, and then the L and G, and then B and Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Next, let's queer up business. HRC warns Anheuser-Busch may lose perfect employer rating over dropping Dylan Mulvaney. The Human Rights Campaign, also known as HRC, could dock Anheuser-Busch's 100% rating awarded for the support it offers LGBTQ+ employees, because of the company's response to the backlash to TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney's Bud Light advert. The beer brand sparked an intense backlash last month after sending trans TikToker Mulvaney a single can of Bud Light to celebrate her 365th day of public transition. The following week saw people smashing bottles of Bud Light in stores, musician Kid Rock shooting cans with an assault weapon, bars refusing to sell the beer, and even Texas Republican Ted Cruz threatening to open an investigation into the brand. After the controversy, Anheuser-Busch's chief executive caved to the pressure by issuing a lukewarm statement saying the company never meant to be part of any discussion that divides people. Now, HRC has warned that the brewer may face losing its perfect corporate equality index score. According to USA Today, the HRC reportedly wrote to Anheuser-Busch suspending its equality score and warning that it has 90 days to respond. Eric Bloom, HRC Senior Director of Programs and Corporate Advocacy, said the company is yet to respond to the letter. HRC holds all the might to make it happen. It suspended Netflix Corporate Equality Index score for the way the streaming service provided handling comedian Dave Chappelle's transphobic comments in 2021. Anheuser-Busch, they've been a big advocate for our community and stuff, and they're thrown in the middle of another one of these fights over something that shouldn't be a conversation that we need to be dealing with. Continue on from the story before a little bit. Your community, because you've we introduced you as trans, how are you seeing this? Because, where is the fear on your level? You fit in, but for so many, they don't necessarily fit in. And this,
you mean? Is
passable is what I meant. I'm sorry. I'd just be curious.
Yeah, that's, I think, the big fear for a lot of these things is people who don't pass or people who are cisgender but might not fit in and even align with what people are expecting.
Right.
Like bathroom bans have affected cis women just as much as trans women, or maybe not just as much, but have impacted. And it impacts everyone because it's coming back to them trying to enforce rigid gender norms. And I think it definitely was a cop-out on the side of Anheuser-Busch to say, oh, we don't mean to be in the conversation that's dividing people. Well, you have to pick. You can't be on both sides so that you always win. You have the power.
And it remains to be seen how the bans on this, so for example, you serve alcohol in your restaurant. Do you serve Anheuser-Busch? And would you consider a ban the way that the Chicago bars are doing, the way the LGBTQ
if they came
bars
down against the LGBT community, yeah, we probably would call it.
Most likely. But the thing is, Anheuser-Busch, for Anheuser-Busch to basically say that we are neutral, that falls into the trap that is set by organization, the so-called 1 million moms, which I'm pretty sure is just one mom and a bottle of wine, and
or 5 old men and
but anyways, they all saying that brands must be neutral since stay out of the culture war. That's not the point. Staying out of the culture war is code for ignore your minority customers and only cater to white cisgender heterosexual Christians.
Bobby, what would be interesting is this is no different really than where Disney started out in their fight against Don't Say Gay.
Well,
they took a very neutral position and didn't want to stand up.
And that's why Bob Chapek can't.
And then they caved, and if you want to call it cave, then went supporting their employees. And what is Anheuser-Busch going to do?
Well, Anheuser-Busch can say that out and loud. We are going to have rainbow-hued can in every Publix in the country. Go shoot it.
I'm curious from your perspective. What do you think about HRC's response? Do you think that they should suspend their 100% rating?
I am skeptical. I'm curious to see how much weight that holds, to see whether they care. And they are a huge, the brands that we showed just in the picture, that's not even all of their brands. They're an enormous employer, an enormous distributor. and all speaking to their having to choose a side. If they want to vote like an individual, then and have rights like individuals, then they need to take a stance like individuals. But I think it'll be interesting. I hope they care. 100% that should say that they've been doing the work and that it should matter. So I'm hopeful.
I'm going to play devil's advocate at Queer News tonight. AB Bev put in all of the work. They have 100% rating at the HRC, which already indicates that they've put in all of the work. I think in general, the LGBTQ community gets lost in the fact that this was not a marketing campaign at Anheuser-Busch. This was an embracement of the celebrity of her and creating a specialty can as a reflection and support of her, not as a marketing campaign at Anheuser-Busch. And it went all awry. And and some people are going to make the argument that if we heavy threat the boycott or whatever the degree of what we're talking about, it has chilling effects on our business allies, because at the end of the day we're talking when we just said in the story, we're talking about a single can was prepared, and she does the embracement. It is not a rejection of trans.
I would agree with you as well, as if they've done all the work and their employees they're still treating the employees, which is what got them the 100% rating. That hasn't changed. Yes. So pulling it, like, what do? We're slapping them on the wrist and punishing their employees. I mean, like, if they don't change the way they do business internally, I don't know that you pull away the 100%. I understand why we want to make a statement, but again, like, back to your point, Al, is about our allies, and they're still in our back court. We just don't like this thing that's happened now and how they've handled it.
Well, the only critique is that they could have come out stronger. They could have. They came out with a lukewarm, like, oh, we just want to be neutral. Okay,
some advisor.
You can't really be neutral.
But on the other hand, I was going to say that while the embracement is great, and I think, and it's not like Dylan got put on a poster, right? I mean, there's no actual advertising of her. On the other hand, oh, now I lost my train of thought. What was? Okay, never mind.
Well, real quick. I mean, they're not even, just one can. They didn't even create a campaign with her in it. But there are plenty of other huge brands that have, like Nike, that's just the first one that comes to mind. That it just really speaks to, I think, how much hatred there is for trans women, and how a few years, even just 5-10 years ago, it was less so.
Oh, much less so. But I got my train of thought back, is that the boycotts don't work. I mean, the American Family Association, whatever they call themselves, tried to boycott Disney for 2 decades. Didn't work. Right now, 1 million moms, again, is complaining, encouraging boycotting Target, because they, every year, Target launch an LGBTQ clothing collection. That doesn't work.
Let me ask one more time in terms of being the naysayer, of propelling conversation. If Anheuser-Busch doesn't reply to this letter, and Anheuser-Busch says, okay, do whatever you want, does that change one iota of what Anheuser-Busch is to our community and their commitment to our community?
No.
So if not, what's the big deal? What is the issue here? What is the hill that we're willing to die on?
I don't think we should die on it, but I do think that it would be disappointing that they aren't willing to say this matters to us. They're particularly keeping the score, or even, I think, it shouldn't be something that happens in the court of public appeal. It should be a private conversation.
To that point, I'm trying to get clarity. Do you, from your seat, you don't speak for all trans people, I understand, but from your seat, do you think Anheuser-Busch is not a gigantic ally of the LGBTQ community? And I'm including the T in that they're not a gigantic ally?
I mean, I think an ally also has to has to also speak up when there are attacks against the group that they are saying they're an ally of.
Yeah.
But this might also be a case of HRC's reputation of being a little out of touch and a little full of themselves. That's very possible too.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Oh, sorry. Next, let's queer up sports. A match made in queer heaven. Anaheim mayor invites the sisters to Angels Pride Night. Anaheim's mayor has invited a group of self-described queer and transgender nuns that was disinvited from the Los Angeles Dodgers' annual LGBTQ+ Pride Night to be her guest at the Los Angeles Angels' upcoming Pride Night. It was unclear whether the group would accept the invitation or have any official participation in the team's June 7th event. Last week, the Los Angeles Dodgers pulled a group of self-described queer and trans nuns from their list of honorees during the team's upcoming Pride Night. The decision was made after complaints were raised by several Catholic organizations and Senator Marco Rubio, who said that the group disparages Christians. The organization Catholic Vote also condemned the group's inclusion in the Dodgers event. Its president, Brian Birch, issued a statement hailing the team's decision to exclude the group. In response, the sisters issued a statement expressing deep offense at being uninvited to the event, calling the decision a capitulation to hateful and misleading information from people outside their community. Other high-profile Southland supporters of LGBTQ+ rights also chimed in, expressing disappointment in the Dodgers' decision. Los Angeles County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath had blasted the team for disinviting the sisters. Yesterday, the abbess of the LA Sisters, Sister Dominia, and board member Sister Berance Knows met with the president of the Dodgers. The charity group has not only accepted an invite back to the Pride Night, but the Dodgers will be presenting the group, founded in 1979, with a Community Hero Award. Well, that is very, very quick. So I do think,
very quick.
Sometimes
Great observation.
Public pressure does work. I think it is really disappointing, the fact that LA, the heart of California, which is arguably one of the most protected and progressive states in the country, is seemingly reacting to what we have going on here. Like, oh no, they're transgender, or they're dressing in drag, or is it really about the religious angle is what I'm wondering.
Yeah. Well, yay sports ball, and I'm sorry, Rubio, somebody must have called for toilet paper, and Rubio came rolling in. Who asked him? He should be worried about what's happening here in Florida, not in California.
It doesn't matter, but these organizations, these so-called religious advocacy organizations, are notoriously small. They always represent a very vocal but very minority slice of the conservative population, and they make a lot of noises. Some people, if the Dodgers organization are not familiar with them, or they are just like, oh my God, there's this league of Catholic voters, they might have overreacted more than they should have.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we don't know whose ear they had. Like, he could have come in the first thing in the morning, and the head of whatever calls them and says, "We're outraged. You need to do something." And no one's heard from the other side yet. No one's heard from the sisters.
I'm curious to that point. Is the LGBTQ community going to accept this apology and go, okay, Dodgers, you did it right. Do you think we will?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
I mean, yeah. I mean, people make statements. They make mistakes and not well advised. They come back and reevaluate that decision. And if they, as a group, clearly more than one person was involved in repealing the taking back of the invite. Then you can say
create an artificial award to say you're great.
You know what? They had to cover their ass.
I want to know. I want to know what led to them being disinvited in the first place, because clearly some thought went into inviting them and putting that program together. So how they go from here? Yes, we want to keep allies. We want to know that they've learned from this mistake. And I mean, looking at the Catholic Church currently, Pope Francis is much more accepting than, much more progressive than the church has ever been.
Yeah.
So,
and in fact has all kinds of cardinals behind him with butcher knives in their hands, trying to slip it between his shoulder blades at the first opportunity, because he's leading.
And I don't think that we should dismiss the fact that the Dodgers has a Pride Night. Like, let's not forget that wasn't canceled. It was a segment that they didn't necessarily want, which, obviously they changed their mind and went back to, but there was still a Pride Night, which is public. And
You know, there's two, before we move on, there's two things that I think are incredibly interesting. Of course, we're happy on this result. We will see how our community responds, because this is breaking news that happened just this afternoon. The one thing that I think is interesting, the group Catholic Vote, which was one of the big ones that were involved, and Rubio echoing how terrible it is that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, they're funny. They certainly have free speech rights, don't they? They have free speech rights. If the Proud Boy Nazi fascists get to express their free speech, wait, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence also get to do it. And it's just interesting to me that if Catholic Vote would pay one iota as much attention to Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence having negative effect on their children, they would also be protesting, wait, Catholic priests. Because the priests have done way more damage to children in America and all over the world than the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence ever will.
And
Amen.
It's never about children.
No,
it's never
it's
about protecting children.
Never.
You know, and no one really knows the history of this. This is perpetual indulgence. I mean, it just seems like a bunch of people with white face, you know, wearing a nun's, right? You know, and when you look back, and I don't know, I'm not educated enough about it to speak on it, but I know that their whole point is to do good, that they were huge during the AIDS crisis. Like, you know, that
They're
not
making a political protest by being in drag in whiteface as nuns because of what the Catholic Church has done to LGBT. That is the quintessential definition of a free speech protest.
And one thing I did want to say, when you mentioned the Proud Boys getting to exercise free speech, that doesn't fall under free speech when they're inciting violence.
That's exactly right. Right.
All right. Well, let's queer up business. Leaked employee policy manuals show Fox News woke staff policies. Fox News policies were recently exposed when the company handbook was given to the Daily Signal. The handbook states employees are allowed to use bathrooms that align with their gender identity rather than their biological sex, and permitted to dress in alignment with their preferred gender. They must also be addressed by their preferred name and pronouns in the workplace. Fox also offers to help employees come up with a workplace transition plan to ease their gender transition at work. Under the category Gender Transition, Fox's employee handbook promises that the company is dedicated to expanding and strengthening efforts to sustain a more inclusive work environment. These are just a few of the policies outlined in the company's handbook, dated January 2021. The revelations come amid conservative consternation at Fox Digital's use of activist language like gender-affirming care in stories on their website, as well as the site's consistent use of female pronouns for biological males. The Daily Signal talks to current and former Fox employees who requested anonymity but shared their experiences. One employee said that the news channel wants people to think that it is a place that supports traditional conservative values, but in reality, they are pushing those values aside. Sorry, my tongue's a little tied, but, well, first, two things. One, Fox News, hypocrisy 101, that's their thing.
Wait, Fox News lies?
God, I know, mon Dieu. But second, also consider where Fox Core is located, New York City. Those things are pretty much mandated in the employee handbook. If those things are absent, if Fox tried to enforce what they preach on the airwaves in their workplace, the lawsuits would have made Dominion look like chump change. That would not have happened.
It is hypocrisy at its best and its worst. Of course, most Fox viewers would probably regard this as fake news anyway. So,
I mean, fake news is an all-encompassing attempt now by the conservative universe to basically label anything.
This is like red meat for LGBT. Don't we just love this news? Yeah. Because what we learned this week is that Fox News is like every other major corporation in America. Their diversity and inclusion programs are strong. Why? Because it's good for their business. So the reality of what they're doing and the nonsense that's going on the channel are two different things.
And I mean, we've even heard that from the mouths of some of their biggest pundits, where they're like, wow, these people really believe this, or they're making fun of their viewers, or whatever it is. Yeah. There's just money to them.
And by the way, there's another industry that's just like this, and it's called professional wrestling. It's not real. It's just not real.
Well choreographed.
Choreographed. And by the way, I have to say, and God, I'm going to be just going to be crucified for saying this, but I love Sean and Tucker, and I'm so sad you're not there, and Laura, just a little bit better, knowing that they're going into their bathrooms going, hey trans buddy, hey non-binary buddy, let's use the toilets. I like them a little better.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're private bathrooms. They are not joining the hoi polloi.
Don't break my bubble. I'm thinking about them in the bathroom, all of us sharing one big happy family.
Jack, let's queer up entertainment. That's so metal. Tool's Maynard dresses in drag to spite DeSantis. Tool frontman Maynard James Keenan is fearless in making a bold statement on stage. And at the Welcome to Rockville Festival on Sunday night, May 21st, in Daytona Beach, the singer, who often dons elaborate costumes during his band sets, slipped into something that seemed aimed at making Florida governor and likely Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis feel uncomfortable. Keenan took the stage in a blonde wig, smeared red lipstick, and a body-hugging shirt that showed off his fake breasts. The outfit appeared to be a reaction to a controversial bill signed by DeSantis last week, one of which bars minors from attending drag shows, as well as measures that severely restrict discussion of personal pronouns in schools and banned gender-affirming care for minors. According to Keenan's recent interview on Steve-O's Wild Ride podcast, Keenan used to wear breasts in 1997 and was waiting for the right moment to bring them back to his stage performances. As noted in Consequence, the singer was technically in violation of the new law, as Welcome to Rockville was an all-ages festival. Keenan isn't the first artist to mount a public protest against the conservative laws. Husband and wife team Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick danced to Taylor Swift's Karma last month, sporting "Drag is an art and drag is a right" t-shirts to protest the Tennessee anti-drag law. Well, first of all, we should all be grateful to Maynard James Keenan for giving his band the suggestively homoerotic name Tool. Second, and that's also important to know that singer-songwriter James McMurtry, who is the son of the late Lonesome Dove and Terms of Endearment novelist Larry McMurtry, who won an Oscar for co-writing the screenplay to Brokeback Mountain, he performed in a dress in Nashville a couple of weeks ago. And he said, quote, "Drag shows harm no one, and they often fill the clubs so the clubs can make rent and payroll and still be open for business when I need gigs," end quote.
That's fantastic. Also, I would love that if Kevin Bacon and Kira actually were in drag doing it. I mean, Kira's a drag queen, Kevin is a drag queen. That would have been hilarious.
It'd be adorbs.
Yeah.
Can production put up the picture of him with the lipstick and can we see that picture one more time if possible? Okay, so that's Saturday night on Welton Drive.
That's what happened last time you were drinking.
Right, exactly. I was going to say that looks very familiar to me. You know, it's really interesting because I ask at Queer News Tonight, and y'all know we've had this conversation so many times, is the LGBTQ community going to show up next November in arguably, you know, we've always said this for the last number of cycles, arguably the most important election that in my lifetime, in 50-some, 40-some years that I have voted, the most important election. Will LGBT show up? Because in 20, we did not. The question is, where I do know is going to show up is our entertainers. Entertainers over the next 12 months This type of protest is going to grow and grow and grow. And whatever happens between DeSantis and Trump is going to get worse and worse and worse. And if it is Ron DeSantis, you just don't see the train that's blowing its whistle on the horizon that you can't see yet, because this is going to run out of control, and it is going to devastate your political ambitions.
And I know, Bobby, you said that you'd love to have seen them dress in drag. I'm actually glad that they're just doing T-shirts with a statement on it that makes you think, instead of trying to extrapolate further out by them dressing in drag. I love that they've got the T-shirt and they're like, okay, we're making a statement.
Well, I think the entertainers who are actually being in violation of the laws are the kind of protest that we need, because it's not them who are going to get arrested. It's the people who are just on the street in their day-to-day lives who don't pass.
The real drag queens too.
Next, we are proud of our special partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. Supporting that partnership, we are broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine Cathedral at the Happening Out television studios. We broadcast Sunshine Cathedral's Sunday International Service at 10:30 a.m.
Well, we finished tonight's Queer News headlines with a segment we call LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News.
LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News. Let's queer up religion. Head of Mormon Church says to treat trans people with love and dignity. President Dalen H. Oaks and his wife, Kristen, of the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, have advised to show love towards LGBTQ plus members and those with gender dysphoria. He said anyone who does not treat individuals who face gender identity challenges with love and dignity is not aligned with the teaching of the first and second Great Commandments. Regarding transgender members, he suggested affected persons and families should take the long view and seek to rely and act on eternal principles. On LGBTQ plus issues, he holds firm on same-sex attraction, but urges members to treat those facing gender identity challenges with love and dignity.
LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News. Let's queer up lesbian culture. Google Doodle honors Native American lesbian activist Barbara May. The Google Doodle for Monday, May 22nd, honored Barbara May Cameron, a Native American lesbian activist. Cameron, who died on February 12, 2002 at age 48, was a well-known poet, writer, and human rights activist in the fields of lesbian and gay rights, women's rights, and Native American rights. The doodle was created by queer Mexican and Chitamachan artist Sienna Gonzalez. Cameron co-founded Gay American Indians alongside her friend Randy Burns. Cameron viewed Gay American Indians, GAI, as both a support group for Native lesbians and gay men and a means to carve out space for them within the wider and whiter LGBTQ plus community.
LGBTQ plus 1 Minute News. Let's queer up hotspots. In this week's hotspots, gay Disney. Hotspots magazine's new issue will be on stands Thursday, and it features everything you need to know about the upcoming Gay Disney in Orlando from May 31st to June 5, held at the DoubleTree by Hilton Orlando at SeaWorld. We're giving you a sneak peek of the cover now. Gay Days are open to everyone under the LGBTQ+ umbrella, as well as allies. Gay Days will feature exciting events and parties like Orlando's Beach Ball at Aquatica Water Park, official pool parties featuring DJ Araceli Monterolo, DJ Chris Adams, DJ John Stum, and more. You can also enjoy Drag Queen Bingo, Porn Bingo, the 7th annual Miss Gay Days pageant, and Red Shirt Pride Day. While in Orlando for Gay Disney, you can stop by all of the local bars, restaurants, and nightclubs and establishments, as many of them also are celebrating with their own fabulous events for Gay Disney. The magazine has all of the details of each one of these events and parties. Grab your copy on stands for Hotspots Magazine on Thursday.
LGBTQ+ 1 Minute News. Let's queer up education. Education Department says Georgia may have violated student civil rights with book ban. The Education Department's Office of Civil Rights last week announced that a Georgia school district may have violated student civil rights by removing books that contain characters who are people of color or LGBTQ+. The office concluded its investigation into Forsyth County School District after the school put restrictions on more than a dozen books in 2022 due to parents' complaints. The department interviewed staff from the school, reviewed meetings regarding the book removals, and looked through documents from the district and parents. Debates over book bans have increased in recent years, particularly in Florida, where DeSantis' education overhauls have drawn national scrutiny.
LGBTQ+ 1 Minute News. Let's queer up LGBTQ+ civil rights. Florida moms band together to fight social terrorist group Moms for Liberty. Jen Cousins remembers the exact moment she decided to stop Moms for Liberty when, during a school board meeting in Orange County last year, one Proud Boys member, Jacob Engels, read genderqueer completely out of context, creating chaos, which she had to witness with her 12-year-old non-binary child by her side. Jen knew that one member of the extremist parental rights group, Moms for Liberty, Alicia Farrant, gave that book to Jacob. After the book was banned in Orange County, Cousins joined with Stefana Farrell, a mom to 2 biracial children, to create the Florida Freedom to Read Project to combat the banning of books from Florida's libraries and the work of groups like Moms for Liberty, which has caused bans of hundreds of pro-LGBTQ+ books from school libraries. That is today's news for the LGBTQ+ community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ+ evening news show.
If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of a very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ+ news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ+ digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ+ stories in motion and sound. That is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of these LGBTQ+ reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Mateo Ventura Bruer, Glen Weinzimer, Dr. Bobby Huen, and Gregg Shapiro. We'll see you daily at 8 p.m. But before we end our show, we have one final story. Now we queer up the big interview. A legacy comes to a close as South Florida Gay News, SFGN, shuts down. Earlier today, I sat down with the now former publisher of SFGN to discuss what is happening as the newspaper closes down and what the future holds. LGBTQ plus news is important to the LGBTQ plus community, especially to the local community. So let's talk SFGN, South Florida Gay News, and its publisher, Jason Parsley. Jason, welcome to Unapologetically Queer. As everyone knows, I'm the host, Al Ferguson, and I am proud to talk to some of the most interesting people that are inspiring to our LGBTQ plus community. At Hotspots Happening Out, one of our objectives is to bring inspiring queer stories and information from across the world to our audience. Jason Parsley, along with the iconic founder, Norm Kent, has been the backbone of queer news in South Florida, reporting on Florida, the nation, and across the world. So welcome to Queer News tonight. And Jason, I understand you're unapologetically queer.
I am.
Yeah, for a long time.
For a long time.
For a long time. Okay, well, let's start. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, but let's start about you. You're a hard news guy. I know some of your past, but I bet most of our viewing audience doesn't. Tell us about you and your experience in journalism and hard news.
Well, I graduated from Florida Atlantic University in 2007, and at the university I worked at the student newspaper where I was editor-in-chief, and I sort of got the bug then. I did some hard-hitting stories. The student body president had to resign because I exposed him embezzling money from the students. And so ever since then, I've always been, it's been a high adrenaline.
And something you've enjoyed. You've focused on getting to the meat of the story as opposed to the sensational that is frequently part of the LGBTQ community.
I would say that, but there's a lot of my critics who would say otherwise.
Yeah, okay.
They think I'm a little too sensational.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll get into that. Let's talk about South Florida Gay News, SFGN. Now, as everyone knows, you start with Journalism 101 and you don't bury the lead. So here it is. This week will be the last ever publication of SFGN. When this newsprint and online publication goes to stands this week, SFGN will end a nearly 23-year voice in various inclinations as a leader, perhaps the leader in queer South Florida news. It started as The Express on January 24, 2000, and then on January 25, 2010, it transitioned into South Florida Gay News. Before we get into the details of how this happened, let's talk about the personal with you, Jason. I know this last month or so, maybe much longer than month, maybe months, maybe this year for 2023. Been very difficult in the transition process of SFGN and Norm and the loss of Norm Kent. Tell us, when you hear those words coming out of my mouth, how does that wash over you personally? How do you feel about it?
It has been a long year, not just a few months, but really a whole year, because as Norm began to get more sick, you know, he transferred a lot of the responsibility to me. And so it's been, it was a good year of dealing with this and this transition, really. And so he did die in April, and obviously we all are saddened by that. It's a huge loss to the community, especially to our local journalism. You know, as you said, that he started with LGBT news back in 2000. So it was a huge loss. And he had left the company to me, and I had hoped to carry on his legacy under the banner of South Florida Gay News, but it's just not possible to do.
Yeah, I want to get into the details of that to make sure that we kind of explore what happened. But before I move on and we move into the details, I'm curious about how how long have you been at SFGN?
Since 2011.
11. Okay.
So after
you came in right early.
After I graduated FAU, I went to work for a subsidiary of the Sun Sentinel, their community news division.
Right.
So I covered various cities in Palm Beach County, where I got that really hyper-local experience. And then I started, I think I was interviewed when they just celebrated their first 1-year anniversary, South Florida Gay News.
So when you hear the words that this week will be the last issue of SFGN, largely circumstances beyond your control, which we'll get into, and just personally, how does that wash over you?
The past 2 months has been just 2 months of grieving Norm's loss, then grieving the loss of the newspaper as well. But I also am inspired too, because as Norm showed, it didn't necessarily matter what the name was. He still did the journalism.
Yeah,
he did it through Express Gay News. He did it through South Florida Gay News, and
we're going to talk about the future. That's interesting because, and I think that's one of the most interesting themes of the story today about SFGN. When SFGN, by the way, launched in January 2010, they published, actually just slightly before you, a mission statement. And it's as timely today as it was when it was written 13 years ago. It began with a statement, and we're going to show it to you in a moment, with a statement about what launched SFGN, the demise of the Express. And the paper said 13 years ago when SFGN launched, quote, the Express, not a bad name for a local gay paper. 10 years ago, on January 24, 2000, that paper came to South Florida as your voice, only to be lost to a national gay media company that collapsed last November. The Express is now just a name tied up in bankruptcy court, but we are still here, a community very much alive and thriving, and we need a voice. Why not use our own? And that is how South Florida Gay News is born. That was prophetic 13 years ago in transition. It's interesting to me that South Florida Gay News launches by saying transition's not bad.
I think that I totally agree with that statement. I don't know if I've ever actually read it, so
yeah.
I'm glad that you just read that, because that actually inspires me even more today.
Good. All right, well, let's dive right into SFGN. Then SFGN launched the new mission statement in January of 2010. And this conversation opportunity with Jason Parsley is to commemorate the history of SFGN and then to be able to discuss what's next. So let's go back to its beginning, January 2010. It's an interesting place to start our conversation. The first edition of South Florida Gay News wrote, quote, SFGN is a paper that speaks with you, to you, and about you. A paper that pulls no punches, protects our friends, defends our allies, and defines our adversaries. A paper that is gay in name only. The South Florida Gay News is a no-holds-barred review of our lives, our community, but it also is a recognition that we have a lot more in common with the mainstream community than they sometimes give us credit for. You see, the gay community is about business and enterprise, commerce and education. We are no different than everyone around us. We are a part of the world, not apart from it. We experience breakups and financial crisis, endure sickness and loss, see our dreams deferred. Those of us who grew up in the age of AIDS also have seen too many young men die too young. This paper will record our past, not forget it. The South Florida Gay News will celebrate our lives with daily news, briefs, and storied features, breaking news, and lifestyle profiles. Lofty and successful goals, and largely accomplished over the last 13 years. And you've been key, front and center of that. What do you think about the 13 years of South Florida Gay News, that mission statement on the first day and where it closes this week? What do you think about that?
I think that we have done a lot of great journalism. We have inspired people. We have showcased our diverse community. And just a few years ago, people were questioning whether or not there was still a need for an LGBT newspaper because we've gone so mainstream. And I think that this year alone has taught us why more than ever do we need to be telling our own stories and not rely on the mainstream outlets to define us and to tell those stories for us. We have to tell our own stories. And because right now we're in this climate of a governor that wants to silence and erase us completely out of our school system and more, completely erase our culture. And we are in this war right now. And so more than ever is LGBT news needed.
I want to dive in. So we've had this 13 years. I'm going to go back and look at a few things about SFGN that I'm fascinated about. But let's talk about what's happened here. I interviewed Norm, as you know. I believe I did the last interview with Norm Kent, and the only one that I'm aware of that was in television, digital television. His health was failing. He's had quite a difficult number of years with cancer and COVID and the brain tumor, et cetera. A very significant health. I thought it was all prepared for, though. He sat in the exact seat that you are sitting in. We did an hour. And it was interesting to me because he came to life in that interview. He was very frail, and then he became Norm Kent again, and I could see the Norm Kent. And he talked about you. He talked about the paper. I thought in leaving that that everything was all set. What happened in the last couple of months? What did you find? What were the issues that have caused the closure this week?
Ultimately, we were in $700,000 to $800,000 of debt. And he did leave me the company. He left myself and the sales manager, Justin Wise, the company. And we had hoped to continue on as normal, but there was just no way that we could see ourselves digging ourselves out of that hole. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my life, paying off debts that weren't mine. And so I wanted to start with a clean slate, a fresh slate, a clean slate, and so did my now business partner, Justin. We've both felt that that was the only way to move forward. And, like I said before, Norm had owned Express Gay News. He had owned South Florida Gay News. His legacy isn't a name of a newspaper. His legacy is me and what I brought, and his mentorship of me. And so his legacy will continue on. It'll just be a different name. Yeah. And so that's really what.
I want to make sure that we're clear on this point, because so many people are going to watch this interview and understand where you are and what you're going to do next. I heard repeatedly, Norm didn't say it to me directly, but I heard repeatedly that he was basically leaving the paper to you. That's correct? Is that a correct statement?
It is. Yeah. But I've seen other situations. I've dealt with other people in my life who have died, and sometimes when people die, things can get complicated and a little messy. And so, we didn't even quite know who the owner was or owners were. There was other investors involved, and so as we learned more and more since his death, we realized it just wasn't sustainable.
Did all of this, after his death, did he discuss any of it with you, of any of the details that sitting here today? Did he ever discuss any of the details with you?
Some of these details I knew, but I didn't know the truth, and I didn't know the reality of it until he died.
Give me an example of the reality that you learned, that you knew something about it, but not to the reality of what it was.
So the paper actually wasn't just started by Norm. SFGN was founded by Norm and his business partner, Piero. And Piero left the company in 2020. And Norm found a new partner. And there was a discrepancy on whether that new partner owned the company, if they were just an investor. And so I didn't know all of the facts. And I was told one story, different people told me different stories. And so it turns out that other person did actually own 40% of the paper. And I never saw that contract until Norm died. So that was one revelation.
So you're thinking, as example, the paper Transition is coming to you, but there's a partner that owns 40% of the company that you didn't know existed.
Yes, and in the will, it left me 60%, Justin 40%, and there was no mention of any other partners involved.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by new revelations and whatnot.
Yeah. Has he commented on his percentage of ownership of SFGN? If you're able to divulge that, is this partner that you were unaware of commented in terms of what the situation is for SFGN?
Not publicly, but we've had discussions with this person, and this person is quite enthusiastic about what we want to do next.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And let's talk about the primary issues that affect the decision making to close SFGN. One of the things that I've heard is that there is quite a significant SBA loan that was done during pandemic. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah. And by significant, like $800,000. Is that accurate? 500,000. And were you aware of the amount of debt that Norm had taken on for SFGN, especially during pandemic?
I was. There were 2 loans, and one of the loans did not come through until last August. So I definitely was aware of that. And unfortunately, much of that money is gone.
And anything that you can say when you say it's gone of what that means in terms of...
Well, for instance, the night that Norm died, $22,000 went missing from the bank account. Obviously, it wasn't Norm that did that. You know, he was in no shape or form to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So things like that. Yeah. And really there's, you know, I could go into the nuance of it, or the minutia, but ultimately our bank accounts were drained.
Yeah. So literally, one morning you wake up and SFGN basically becomes financially insolvent in terms of the transition, and that's what you find you interpret.
Correct.
Yeah. I have to ask you, Jason, in being responsible to understand SFGN, are you disappointed in how Norm left this? Such an icon in the community and such a longevity. I mean, you're right out of college, and this is basically, really, for all intents and purposes, your first and big job. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Norm Kent today?
I started as managing editor. He gave me my dream job. I will forever be grateful for the opportunity that he gave me.
Yeah.
So, do I hold any ill will? Not at all. I mean, I love Norm Kent. Norm Kent is an icon. And, you know, businesses come and go in this world, and there's no point in harboring those type of feelings, you know. In fact, today I'm excited about the future.
Yeah,
and
which we're going to talk about.
Which we'll talk about soon. But as for Norm, I will always be grateful for him.
Yeah, okay.
He gave me this opportunity, and it's because of him and South Florida Gay News that I have the standing I do today.
Yeah. Yeah. Last thing I want to ask you about this transition and what you found and what the last couple of months have been for SFGN is you personally understand where the situation is for South Florida Gay News and the business and the money and loan debt that is beyond capability to pay, etc. But I'm curious from your standpoint, over the last couple of years, especially in the last year, and going through, I mean, let's not forget what you, SFGN, and the entire LGBTQ community has gone through since January of 2020. We've gone through a crisis in the last 3 years. Anything that, looking back at what's happened here at SFGN, anything you would have done different?
Different in what way?
In whatever way. Knowing what you know now, is there anything that you would have done different to try to have a different conclusion for you, or a different conclusion for SFGN, or a different conclusion for Norm, or whatever? Anything you would have done different?
No, I have no regrets.
Yeah.
The reality is that we can't predict the future. We have to play the cards we've been dealt, And I think that we are doing that right now. We're playing the cards that we've been dealt, and we're going to be bigger and better and stronger going into the future.
Yeah, okay. And before we explore that, I want to take one more minute to revisit the history of SFGN. For viewers that do not know, especially around the country, SFGN is one of probably 10 or 11, maybe at the top 15 legacy regional local LGBT outlets. SFGN is in that category. So, you know, a lot of great and a lot of terrible things have come out of SFGN, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting. Let's revisit for a moment some of the best and worst moments for SFGN. I want to ask you, Jason Parsley, your favorite moment in the last 13 years at SFGN was what?
My favorite moment. There's so many of them. I mean, we've had such I believe we've had such an impact on our community, and just telling those voices and the things that we've done. And I don't know if we can
give
really
me an example.
Like story-wise?
Yeah,
okay.
story-wise.
Like, for instance, our well, until the pandemic hit, but we had our annual Out 50, where we spotlighted just 50 amazing people that maybe don't always get highlighted or showcased in our community, people that are working behind the scenes and just really driving us forward, moving us forward every single day, and be able to spotlight those people. Or the story I did on the entrapment by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office for a sting operation they had set up, a years-long sting operation where they had really targeted gay men in parks and whatnot, and just the links they went to arrest our community.
Mm-hmm. I was expecting you to do a story or to say, "Oh, I just love the story I did on RuPaul or Drag." No, I'm only kidding.
Well, speaking of that, I did love my Adam Lambert story.
And why is that? Why?
Well, it was a bit of an exclusive because when I was interviewing him, he had mentioned, at the end of the conversation, I said, "Do you have any exclusives for me today?" And he said, well, actually he did. He had just broken up with his boyfriend. He hadn't told anyone yet.
Oh.
So when we reported that, the news went international. It went viral. And it was an exciting thing for me. It shut our website down for like every hour.
Because of traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we just got so much traffic, and so many newsletters all around the world cited us, and even some of them said, well, you can't click on the link right now because our website is crashed because of the amount of traffic.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the highest compliment I can give you on that favorite is I hate you right now. So congratulations to you. What besides pandemic, because I know that how tragic that was, what was some of the big worst moments of the last 13 years at SFGN?
Some of the worst moments.
Did you have any? Was there any moment where you go, oh, my goodness?
There was one. I don't know if I forget the date now, but when we printed an ad that was racist, that had showcased that it went through our checks and balances and whatnot, and that was a heartbreaking moment for me, and I just hated it. And
when that happened, remind everybody, how did you go about correcting it? What did you do?
We pulled all the papers off the stands right away. You know, the basically what the person had placed the ad, it was supposed to be satire, and you know, and so, but when we really examined it after the fact, unfortunately, we realized it was extremely offensive and racist, and so we immediately pulled all of the papers off the stands and tried to rectify it as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Taking that action, did the community forgive you?
I think so.
Yeah.
Now, the people that actually brought it to our attention said that, you know, they had forgiven us for that.
Yeah, mistakes. Okay. Let's take a moment in looking back, and you can't talk about SFGN without talking about Norm Kent. He was a force to be reckoned with. Now, he's iconic, even with this story here about the closure of SFGN, the new program at Our Fund in terms of the journalism scholarship with Our Fund, his recognition at the WNBA Awards for Icon Legacy, etc. etc. I'm curious in terms of Norm Kent, because it's my first opportunity to ever ask Jason, were you aware of how many people didn't like Norm Kent?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and tell us about that. How do you know that, and how did you hear it?
I mean, he was famous for his rivalries.
Yeah.
You know, there was always a rivalry. And from the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, Dean Trentalis, that was one of the most famous. There was the rivalry with Bobby Blair, who was the owner of the Florida Agenda, who was our
principal competitor for,
7 years or whatnot.
Yeah. And when you would hear this in community of these reactions to Norm Kent, the general reaction from my seat of watching it outside of the fishbowl is that you had either respect for Norm Kent or you were at the end of the sword of Norm Kent. So you have to be a journalist, publisher, politician, negotiator. How did you handle all of that, of running the interference for the news outlet of SFGN and Norm Kent?
I really took it in stride, because ultimately when you're in this business, we as journalists, we dish it out, so we have to be able to take it. And one of the things that I loved about Norm is that he loved criticism. We constantly printed letters to the editor that criticized us. And we were never shy to do that. Yeah. And he really encouraged it, because he believed in a diverse set of voices, and he wanted to showcase those voices. Now, his editorials were sometimes scathing and biting. I often had the pleasure or not pleasure of having to edit them. But
he allowed you to do that?
When he turned them in with enough time. He was notorious for always missing deadlines. Okay. But I did try.
So you could correct when you had the opportunity.
Yes.
And then if you didn't have time, purely his words got in.
So, I tried to tone them down when I felt they went over the top. Yeah. But oftentimes, he did piss people off with his editorials.
Yes.
And I think that it's a little more difficult to get pissed off and upset with people when you're writing straight news, if you're really just focused on the facts and whatnot, because you have to dispute facts. And when you're doing your job and you're doing your due diligence, it's a lot harder to get really upset and mad. But he was an opinion writer. Yeah. And so it's a lot easier to get upset at someone's opinions.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And an editorial is an editorial. It's just a personal perspective. It doesn't even represent the entire paper, even if you own it. I'm curious about covers. There has been so much conversation. I've been here. I was invited down for the launch of It's Happening Out, and then ultimately Queer News Tonight. And there's been so much conversation about covers through the years at SFGN. I'm curious from your seat, an opportunity as we look back at SFGN, your favorite cover of all of the covers you participated in is what?
You put me on the spot, because 13 years is a lot of stories, a lot of covers that we've published and stuff. But I will say this, is that one of the changes, I think, or as I took more and more control of the company, is that I think that I look at the cover a little bit differently than I think Norm did. And I really believe that the cover, we need to make a statement with the cover. And I've also believed that it's okay to have fun with the cover and to be more sensational. As
I was going to ask you, could that mean that the cover was designed to be more incendiary?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this week's cover...
Was that your decision-making, or was that Norm's?
It depends which cover you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. But in general, let's say over the last 3 or 4 years...
most of them were mine.
Yeah, so
most of them were my vision.
Your seat.
Yes. And that's why... when you mentioned earlier how people didn't like Norm, some of that actually might have been me, but because the buck stops with him,
they... Now, see, I've never heard that before.
I got to sort of escape escape some of the criticism.
Okay, and before I go on, a particular cover that you go, There it is.
No, I love this week's cover.
Yeah. Okay.
I do. I think
All right. I haven't seen this week yet. So
this past week.
Oh, this past week. Okay. We'll explain that. Explain what the cover is.
It was really it was humor, satire, and it was Ron DeSantis, and the headline was Mean Girl. And the subhead was why are you so obsessed with us? Right. And I think a lot
there was an implication in that secondary line.
And a lot of in our community we love Mean Girls the movie, and so I think a lot of people will get that reference. And it's I think that's maybe that's the a lot of us don't have a lot of power to take on someone like Governor DeSantis. Yeah. So if we can troll him a little bit and have a little fun, that's the best way to do it.
Jason, aren't you proud? Oh, I am. Well, good. We are showing the cover. Aren't you proud that right to the end you were relevant with a cover like that?
Oh yes, absolutely. We're going out with a bang.
Yeah.
And but beyond that, we've had some great covers.
Any others that you want to mention?
I mean, even another DeSantis cover we did last year. I don't think I can say the word on here, but
you can say anything.
F you.
Yeah.
We kind of.
Yeah, we say fuck you here.
Okay.
Right.
Well, we did put fuck you after he signed the first "Don't Say Gay" bill. We got fuck you on the cover, and I particularly definitely like that one too.
Yeah, that's something you couldn't have probably done at the Sentinel.
No, absolutely not. Maybe not even New Times.
Yeah, right.
Like I said, we've done some very New York Daily News type covers that we've been very bold.
There it is. I was wondering if you were going to go there. And and you know who owns the New York Daily News, right?
I don't.
Yeah. Okay. And later you're going to laugh hysterically, but true. There's two covers I want to mention. And I want to ask you about, and especially now that I understand that the incendiary decision-making was principally sitting with you in possibility. One cover was the green cover about Publix, and you turned the entire cover kind of a shady read on Publix.
Yes.
And tell us what the inspiration was for that, and why did you do that?
Well, I mean, the cover story was about Publix, and so that made sense to do something with Publix, and that was definitely my vision. I do remember that. I forget the headline, but I think we took a play on their tagline.
Yes.
Yes, we did. And so
where shopping is a pleasure.
We're shopping, yes. And so where discrimination is a pleasure.
Yes, that's right.
That was definitely my vision, because I think that Publix is definitely not a friend of ours.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's sort of where that came from.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to really point that out.
And the other one that I want to ask you about, because I've heard so many different angles, stories, observations about it, is last year, Coral Ridge and the hateful pastor from the 90s at Coral Ridge, I won't even say his name, nationally against LGBT, had their 50th anniversary, and the mayor of Fort Lauderdale did proclamation, and the cover put the mayor of Fort Lauderdale in a priest outfit in a slam, and it was a powerful, powerful cover. The reaction that I heard from community, both in its tongue-in-cheek of loving it and the absolute other side of loathing it, what did you think about that cover, and what was the motivation of doing that?
There's an old saying that I really subscribe to, and that's there's nothing more hypocritical than a thin-skinned journalist. And so, like I said, we dish it out, we have to be able to take it. Having said that, there's nothing more hypocritical than a thin-skinned politician either. And politicians they have a lot of privilege and power, and they're making laws that affect people's lives, and really it's our job to hold them accountable. And so they have to be able to have a thick skin to be able to take criticism.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how the mayor of Fort Lauderdale felt about the cover, but I hope that he I hope he took it as a tongue-in-cheek situation, and again, that he has this incredible amount of power, and so it's important to take that criticism, especially when it's coming from your own community.
Yeah, and we're going to get to talking about what's next.
So as for the cover itself, I loved it, and I
Get
know
over it was on the cover. That's what it said, and with the priest, and
Yeah.
you know, lots of hidden messages in that cover. I'm curious, real quickly, but not talking about your what's next yet. Do you think, from your seat of what you'll do next, that you and the mayor of Fort Lauderdale can be better than the mayor and Norm Kent?
Well, every time I see the mayor out, we always take a picture together. Okay. So that right there means our relationship is better than the two of them. And, you know, he told me that he, you know, would always talk to me. So
okay.
We'll see.
All right. I want to talk about one other thing, because I want to fold John Hayden into a conversation. And I'm going to say, but you can make one-on-one connection, a leading politician. I introduced John to him at an event as community editor. And when I introduced him, John Hayden, an interesting thing happened, because he didn't know who John was. And when I said to the politician, this is the community editor of SFGN, you literally could see in his face, I was going to say revulsion, maybe that's too strong, but the eye roll, you definitely, and the recoil you could see. And then he went off on John, had never met him, and basically said a blah summary, focusing on Norm. Do you think that from your seat, SFGN has done its job when you have that kind of reaction from political business leaders, the director of the Pride Center, whatever it might be?
Well, it's not the reaction that I'm trying to achieve. It's not like I'm trying to get people to have that reaction. As the publisher of the newspaper. But again, like I said, people with power need to be held accountable. And typically it's a newspaper or news outlets that's going to be the ones holding them accountable. Mm-hmm. So they have to have thick skin. Mm-hmm. And they shouldn't be in those positions of power if they can't handle the heat.
So basically what I'm hearing from you, it's on them. If they react that way, that's them, not us.
We always give people an opportunity to respond. Dean, for instance, always had the opportunity to write us a guest column or a letter setter to rebut anything that we've said, or if we've mischaracterized something that he believes that we did. So we want to always give that opportunity. We always did give that opportunity. Now, if people didn't take it, that is on them.
Right, it's on them. It gives me opportunity to discuss a segue of something that we've done at Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out television network, and supporting the news messaging of SFGN. We have worked for, as you know, over a year and a half with John Hayden. We've invited him to anchor at Queer News Tonight. Every single week, we've invited him to do a story, to debut the cover of SFGN, and talk about what is going on into the coming week at SFGN. Now, mind you, we have done that because we've supported for quite a long time the value of SFGNs and their contributions to our community. I'm curious, Jason, now that we can talk about it with SFGN's final publication this week, were you aware of how much pushback that we got for doing that, of even embracing SFGN?
How much pushback you got? Mm-hmm. No.
Yeah. Lots of pushback. It's interesting to me because we're propelling story of saying this is a story and we should all be propelling the story. There was so much reaction in community. Wait, Hotspots and SFGN are going to cooperate in any possible way using the television medium. And our reaction was, yeah, what are you talking about? We don't get it. But does it surprise you that LGBT, we focus on our own silos so much, even to this point where we're trying to propel story in our community? Does that surprise you at all?
You know, a lot of people, I've encountered this before, that some people in our community believe that an LGBT newspaper should only tell the good stories. And Norm had a saying that we have to tell the warts and the wounds too, and we have to hold our own community responsible and accountable first. And so I understand why people sometimes don't like our coverage and our stories. and whatnot. But the reality is that it's not like we're choosing Governor DeSantis over the gay community. Typically, the stories that have received the most pushback, it's been two elements of the LGBT community pitted against each other.
Yeah.
And so we're telling both sides of the an LGBT issue within the LGBT community. Perfect example is Dean Trantalis and the situation with the Coral Ridge. It's not like we were taking the side of Coral Ridge. We were simply, voicing these frustrations and the frustrations within the LGBT community towards the mayor's handling of the situation.
It's interesting to me in terms of what Hotspots and Happening Out has voiced in support in the last year, but certainly in 2023. We've lived in this philosophy that all boats in LGBT rise together, and it really has been a centric mission of our discussion. The last conversation I had with Norm Kent was at his Legacy Award at WNBA at Hunters. And I sat down and I was only going to take a moment or two to congratulate him. And he grabbed my arm and he pulled me down in the seat next to him. And he talked for a long time, and I was uncomfortable about it because so many people wanted Norm's attention, and it was rare that Norm would be in a situation like that. And I just clearly remember, and I'm so glad I did it. And now as we move into the transition conversation with you about what's next, I just want to close the SFGN story from my seat and our seat here at Queer News Tonight, because I said to him, Norm, you can be very proud of SFGN because in the last 6 months, they have done as good a reporting as could be done and justified their existence by the conversation of Pride Fort Lauderdale. And all of the people that said you're against the community unless you say absolutely nothing but good things, that would have been untrue. And SFGN proved it over and over and over. And I congratulated Norm to say, wait, whether you gave Jason permission to do it or John Hayden to do it or the paper to do it or however it unveiled, SFGN proved its value in LGBTQ community. And those were my last words to Norm Kent.
And I'm sure that definitely, touched him. Because that's what ultimately he wanted to do, is have an impact on the community, and that's why he loved journalism.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you. So let's now talk about what's next. I know you've been wanting to do that for quite a bit of time. So,
well, it's hard to talk about past without talking about the future.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So next week, SFGN is going to publish its final cover, final newspaper this week. But next week, you're going to launch a new LGBTQ plus publication and an online platform. And we are revealing right now its new name and its image. And it is called Out South Florida. And now that we reveal that this is what's going to happen next week, tell us about what you're doing and how is it going to work and what can we expect and etc.
Well, as we have discussed today, that obviously it wasn't sustainable to keep SFGN going. So my new business partner and I, Justin, he's been with the company almost as long as I have been. And so we're launching a new publication, Out South Florida, as you mentioned, June 1st. I think it's so appropriate. What a great day to launch a new voice for our community. And we're going to continue to be that voice for the community. And we're going to focus on local news, hard news. And we probably won't be, obviously we won't have Norm's voice anymore. And I don't think that I can fill those shoes, because he had a way with words. He really did. But we are going to focus on local news like South Florida Gay News did as well.
Mm-hmm. And the infrastructure, give us some explanation of what it's going to look like. Same format style, newsprint, comes out on Thursdays. The boxes that you can pull it from, or you see it online.
Well, we have a new name, we have a new logo, we'll have a new website, we'll have a new design, the size of the paper will be the same, the frequency will be the same, it'll be weekly on Thursdays, but it will look different.
And sustainable, because you're not sitting under the cloud of the debt, etc., that you learn at South Florida Gay News. Jason, I would not do a good job if I didn't shake your cage in terms of doing it at this time period. June 1, of course, in terms of the launch of June Pride Month. But everyone in the world says print is over. Everyone says that. We read that over and over and over and over again. I always argue, while I still read lots and lots, the best journalists in America are print journalists. All you have to do is pick up the New York Times or the Washington Post to prove that. And everything that virtually every other outlet in America does, they lead out of whatever the Washington Post and the New York Times have done. Now, I wouldn't be as presumptuous to say that that's what out South Florida is going to be. But in LGBT, we need people that do the research and put the time into the story. Otherwise, you have an advertising cheat, which is exactly what SFGN said 13 years ago, and you launch on June 1st, and I hear you saying the exact same thing.
Well, let me interject for a moment. You know, one of the things that you said, print is dead. One of our big discussions today was our covers. And that only happens in print covers. And so those covers get a lot of attention. Yeah,
absolutely. And something else unique, which I want to point out. If there is a place in the country for LGBTQ where a relaunch of a print newspaper for LGBT could happen, it's South Florida. Because we hear it all the time. We live in a bubble. And a bubble can sustain a print newspaper because there is so much news to consume. Isn't that principally what's at play here?
Yes, and taking that one step further is that South Florida has always been insulated from the rest of the state. We've lived in this really big bubble in South Florida, but I think that our current governor has pierced that bubble.
Yeah.
And he's coming right for us and coming right for the heart of South Florida.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we can, politically speaking, we can really think of ourselves anymore as living in a bubble.
Yeah. Sadly.
I
want to ask you, Out South Florida launches Thursday, June 1st. This week is the last issue of South Florida Gay News, SFGN. What do you want to accomplish? You're that January 2000 for the Express. You're that January 2010 for SFGN. Now you're June 1 of 2023 of Out South Florida. What is it you want to do?
Like I said before, Norm looked at me and the paper as his legacy. So the name won't be around, but the legacy will continue on. His legacy of that hard-hitting journalism, of bringing that voice to the community, that remains. And so we'll be under new ownership, new leadership, a new name. Hopefully we can reset some of those relationships that maybe didn't work out so well between Norm others. But
really sit down at a peace table negotiation.
Yes, we can make peace with some of those people.
Right.
But we're going to start fresh and reset. And I hope that those people that were angry maybe at Norm and some of his commentary, that will give us a chance and let us prove ourselves.
Yeah. You've brought him up a couple of times, and that's the governor, presidential candidate, probably going to announce on the eve of June Pride Month, as we've reported at Queer News tonight. But your queer eye, specifically yours, Jason, you're a watcher in our community, and then you're a storyteller of the LGBTQ community. What does your gut tell you we are watching in DeSantis and in Tallahassee and really the entire world of what we're watching now? What does your gut tell you is really going on?
I think DeSantis wants to be president. That's what's going on. with his agenda here in Florida, and he's going to appeal to the worst parts of the Republican base. And he's going to push that fear and that hatred and that division because that's going to get him votes. That's what's going to separate him from Donald Trump. And so taking a step back and looking at a much larger sense, I think that our community has become so mainstream that this reaction, very negative reaction from, again, the far right. And because the far right has been given such a platform within the Republican Party, and they've been pandered to and catered to, I think that's why you're seeing these overreactions everywhere else.
Well, I'm curious, South Florida is going to launch in this environment as print, which can be difficult. And you're dealing with probably the greatest foe of your lifetime in LGBT, in Governor DeSantis. Do you think the LGBTQ community is going to support you in South Florida?
I mean, so far we've had a lot of private discussions, and so far it's been a great reception, and I think that they will support us. And the one thing that separates us from everyone else and has always separated us from everyone else is that we focus on news. And that's what that's what we do best. That's what we've always done best. And that's what I am going to continue to do with this new publication out South Florida.
It's interesting because you say that there is a reliability that you can count on for out South Florida. And we point out in our conversation here in Unapologetically Queer to all of you that have sadness and that we are all experiencing over the conversation of the end of SFGN. Let me tell you what SFGN said 13 years ago in their transition from the Express. And I think it's so appropriate for where we are today. It seems to me that this could be the launch mission statement of Out South Florida. SFGN launched out of the Express bankruptcy by saying, quote, "This newspaper is not going to be just a promo for White Party or a press release for an AIDS walk. A newspaper celebrates our victories but exposes our warts. The news has no agenda. It reports facts from young hustlers offering their older tricks to, their older tricks to closeted congressmen covering up their secret identities. We will be reporting on book signings and artist exhibitions, seniors who have led cherished lives, businessmen who have made a difference, and young men and women who have inspired us with their vision. Our goal is to have you make our paper your home page. When we have done that, we will have just begun our task, but we will better show you what we intend to do by doing it. Welcome to the South Florida Gay News. Day 1, Issue 1, Page 1, January 25, 2010." End quote. SFGN seemed to accomplish that mission.
And I think that one of the reasons the community rallied behind South Florida Gay News, or the reason, is because Norm Kent was at the helm. And again, they trusted Norm. They didn't care about the name. It was Norm. And so I think I have built up that reputation with my time here at South Florida Gay News. And so I hope that the community will trust me as they trusted Norm going from the Express Gay News to South Florida Gay News. And so I hope they trust me from South Florida Gay News to Out South Florida.
I hear the pitch, and I'm buying what you're selling. I'm pretty sure Jason Parsley and Out South Florida will do that again. All success to you.
And just, I would be remiss, it's not just me. I do have a business partner, Justin Wise. He is the sales manager at South Florida Gay News and the associate publisher. And so this is a joint venture, and we're doing this together.
Yeah. Congratulations to Justin also. All success to you and the new, old voice for LGBTQ plus South Florida. Out South Florida publisher. That's the first time that that's publicly being said in the airwaves. It's not SFGN, it's Jason Parsley, out South Florida publisher. Jason Parsley, thank you for joining us at Queer News Tonight.
Thank you, Al.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBT